I'm Kelley. I'm the Director of Patient Strategy at Praxis, and I got into industry 11 years ago when my son Connor was diagnosed with an SYNGAP1 mutation. I really want to take a minute and celebrate the success that has happened over the past 10 years in the genetic epilepsy community. When my son started presenting with seizures 16 years ago as a baby, there were genome sequencing, exome sequencing was not happening in the clinical setting. There were not large gene epilepsy panels. Most kids, like my son, were not diagnosed. They were termed idiopathic epilepsy. There was no known cause of their seizures, and it was just broad spectrum anti-seizure medications being prescribed that were not working, and other medications for a whole host of symptoms he had. And when he was diagnosed at 5 years old, finally with an SYN2A mutation, his diagnosis was an apology. We don't know much about this. We don't know what it means. We have nothing to offer you. I'm sorry. And when you contrast that with what I've been experiencing the past few days, going to all of these advocacy meetings, where it's groups of parents like yourselves demanding better treatments for your kids and raising funds and finding researchers and scientists to work on treatments for our kids. And so many different biotech companies now have clinical trials for single gene mutations in epilepsy and better anti-seizure medications. It's so amazing, and I wish this was the case 16 years ago when my son was diagnosed, but I'm so grateful it's the case today. Okay, to the Emerald study. So I mentioned I have a son with a DE and I work at Praxis. I am not the only Praxis employee with a child with seizures. There are several of us there, and what that means is we have a sense of urgency. The patient voice is being brought into all of our work meetings, and that lived experience of what these children are going through on a daily basis, and that's really important. I will also say at Praxis, we're absolutely breaking that status quo. You know, most clinical trials, you have to fly long distances to get to a study site, and you have to do this frequently over the series of the clinical trial. With Praxis, we want to remove that burden for families, and so we have found a way to bring the trial to the family's home to make it that much easier to include more families, and we're really proud of that. So Praxis is an epilepsy company. All of these different programs are different molecules to treat a specific type of epilepsy. We have our first platform, it's called Cerebrum, and these are small molecules, and relutrigine is a small molecule, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. We also have an ASO platform, Solidus, and these are single gene ASO treatments. The SCN2A gain of function, elsunersen, is in a phase 3 registrational trial. And then if you notice there, SYNGAP1 is listed. That's Prax90. This is in preclinical development. This program has taken longer than we had hoped, but we are still working on that. And I know for me as a parent, and I don't know if many of you in this room can identify, but after trialing, the third or the fourth anti-seizure medication on my child and not having it work well, I really lost a lot of hope that the fifth or the sixth would do anything different. But I want to make it really clear that relutrigine has a very unique mechanism of action that is different than what is currently available today. It's in the class of sodium channel blockers, but it acts very differently. We consider this a sodium channel modulator, and what that means is it's selective to the hyperactive neuron. So most sodium channel blockers are blocking all sodium channels, and that's where a lot of side effects can happen, like sedation or tiredness or uncoordinated. Relutrigine only acts when the neuron is in a hyperactive mode, and when the neuron is functioning normally, it leaves those neurons untouched. A lot of anti-seizure medications, you have to slowly titrate up over a series of weeks or even months to get to a therapeutic level to then assess if this will be efficacious for your child. With relutrigine, there is no titration. So the dose that you start at is the dose that you stay at. As a parent, you will be able to tell very early on if relutrigine is going to be efficacious for your child. It has a very long half-life, 5 days, so it only has to be administered once per day. The half-life is so long that if you accidentally forget to give the medication for 1 day, it is not going to affect the levels. It's a liquid formulation, so it could be administered orally or by G or J tube, and there's no added sugars, so it's ketogenic diet friendly. And then to touch on the different phases that relutrigine has been trialed in, so we started with a phase 1 study in 130 healthy volunteers. Based on the data that came out of that study, we were able to move into a patient population. We started with a trial called the EMBOLD study. This was a very small cohort, 16 patients of SEN2A and 8A patients. Based on an interim analysis of that data, there was positive safety signals and efficacy signals. We expanded the cohort, and we've been enrolling in a cohort 2 study for the EMBOLD study. We announced last night we've done another interim data cut for this cohort 2. This trial was supposed to continue on over another year. We just announced last night, due to efficacy reasons, we are stopping the study immediately. All patients on placebo are going to be given the actual drug relutrigine, and they'll continue on in a safety cohort. But it's really, really exciting for these patient populations, and it's really just exciting for the entire community. In parallel, we have started the EMERALD trial about 3 months ago, where now we're bringing relutrigine to a broader DEE population, and that is enrolling right now in the United States, and we just opened sites in Brazil. So to touch on some of the data from the EMBOLD study, all patients in this study could remain on their anti-seizure medication regimen, and then relutrigine was added on top of that. So when we did the first interim data cut in month 4, we saw a 46% reduction in seizures, which in this patient population, there is a very high seizure burden, so we were very excited by this. When we did our second interim analysis at the 11th month mark, we saw a 90% seizure reduction. So for these families, this was the first time they were experiencing seizure-free days, seizure-free weeks, and for some of them, seizure-free months. And we know this affects quality of life for the entire family. There were no severe adverse events due to drug, and there were no patients that required a dose reduction of relutrigine due to side effects. We know that seizures are one symptom among many in DEEs, so one of the scales that we utilized in this study is called the CGI, and we pulled out 4 specific domains that we know is troublesome in this patient population, and this was assessed at the baseline, so on the day of screening, by the caregiver and also by the clinician or the principal investigator in charge. So we looked at disruptive behavior, whatever this is unique to the child at baseline, whether it's agitation, irritability, self-harm. We looked at communication, seizure severity and intensity, so how often is rescue medication being used? Are the seizures clustering? How long are they lasting? And then alertness or awareness and interacting with caregivers and those around them. And as you can see, this was done again at the 4-month mark, so when patients were having a 46% median seizure reduction, there were significant improvements in all of these domains. So we're considering relutrigine to have disease-modifying properties in addition to a reduction in seizures. And then we did receive breakthrough therapy designation for relutrigine, and this really means that the data that was generated in this trial is better safety-wise and efficacy-wise than anything else that's available for this specific patient population. And so the entire drug development process is expedited for this program. We're expecting to do the same on EMERALD. Relutrigine has broad applicability, so not limited to sodium channelopathies. Regardless of the root cause of your seizures, there is hyperactivity in the sodium channels, and this is precisely where relutrigine acts. So any neuron that is firing too fast or too often, this is where relutrigine steps in and normalizes that neuron, and the expectation is that then a seizure will not occur. These are the different animal models that we've trialed relutrigine in. So we have SEN2A and 8A. I want to specifically call out SEN1A. In this gene mutation, most of the mutations are loss of function. This animal model was. Typically, sodium channel blockers are contraindicated. They're going to worsen the seizure frequency and severity. With relutrigine, we saw the opposite. So it really further highlights the unique mechanism of action, and then 5 additional animal models that were not in the sodium channel. And we saw efficacy across the board. I want to touch on the trial design for Emerald. So we have options for families. If a family wants to be seen at a trial site, like a traditional clinical trial is run, you're able to do that. The majority of families in Embold and that are enrolling in Emerald, they want the remote from home option. So I'm going to talk through the design with that option in mind. So what families will do is on the day of screening, the PI or principal investigator joins the visit by telehealth, and a physician that's licensed in the patient's home state comes to the family's home along with a nurse. All of the exams, assessment, lab work, everything is done on the day of screening from the family's home. For the next 28 days, the caregiver is just filling out a daily electronic seizure diary. At the end of those 28 days, if the patient has had a minimum of 4 seizures, and all labs are within normal range, the patient is randomized into the trial. It's a 1-to-1 randomization, which means for the next 16 weeks, half of the patients will be on placebo, half the patients will be on relutrigine. There is a study visit once per month. Again, if it's with the nurse or the physician, they're coming to you. The drug is shipped to your home, and the principal investigator is always joining via telehealth. At the end of those 16 weeks is the open label extension, and that just means that every single patient is now on relutrigine. There is no more placebo group. At the end of those 32 weeks, if your child is seeing benefit, you do not need to worry about stopping the drug. There's a 3-year expanded access program built into the protocol so that you have a means to access that drug until there's another way to get it. And just to touch on the decentralized, fully remote from home, so it is still, even though you're doing all of the study visits at home, and there is another physician coming into your home doing the exams and some of the scales, it is still the PI at the site that has oversight over the patient and is managing the relutrigine during the length of the trial. Your primary neurologist is able to be as involved as you want them to be or they're willing to be. So if you would like the PI and your primary neurologist to have conversations, if you want your neurologist to have copies of all of the labs that are done during all of the study visits, we have many patients that are requesting that, and that can happen. And with regard to who is eligible, so anyone with a diagnosis of a DEE, so obviously any SYNGAP1 family. It's a pediatric trial through adult, so you have to be 2 years old at the time of screening through 65. Seizure onset has to have happened by age 12. It's a minimum of 4 motor seizures at the time of screening, so basically 4 seizures a month, and you can stay on your current anti-seizure medication regimen. You don't need to wean off anything. Just 2 of those medications can be sodium channel blockers. And like Mike said, anyone that's interested in learning more, going through our pre-screener does not mean you're signing up today and you want to enroll in this trial. It just means you're interested and you'd like some more information. Maybe you want the PI to talk to your neurologist to make sure this is a good fit for your child. So you would go to our website, resilientstudies.com. There's a page on Emerald. You would schedule a call with the nurse navigator that would take you through some eligibility questions. And then if your child's eligible, the nurse navigator will transfer your information to the study site, and within about 48 hours, the study site PI and study coordinator will reach out to you. Families that already know, yes, I want to enroll in this, you can move as quickly as you want. So once you go through the pre-screening process, if you know you want to consent and you know you want to screen, that can also happen very quickly. I will say we've partnered with Mike. We did a webinar and we've already had 6 SYNGAP1 patients go through our pre-screening process and be transferred to sites. And that is the only way we're going to be able to answer the question if relutrigine is efficacious in SYNGAP1. So we want more SYNGAP1 patients. And that's it.